Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. It seems like I cut off there for a second. Nathan, can you let me know if you can hear me all right now?
Yep, you sound good.
Okay, perfect. Well, it's the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining our webinar today, Migrate SAP Document Content to Microsoft 365. We appreciate everyone being here, and the first thing I'd like to do is take a second and introduce ourselves. Our speakers today are Nathan Hansen, who is the Director of Product Development here at Gimmal, and my name is Shayna Horka. I work in product marketing. I see somebody in the chat. Hello from Miami. Hello. So before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. We will have a live Q&A after today's session, so please feel free to submit questions throughout any point of the webinar, and at the end, we're going to answer as many questions as we have time for. Additionally, please let us know if you have any technical difficulties. Please send us a message and then we'll help you solve any issues you may be having. All right, so to kick things off, I just have one slide here before I hand it over to Nathan to tell you a little bit about Gimmal. Gimmal is a records, information management, and governance software company that was founded in 2002. We have a client success team and global network of partners that have been delivering solutions with us for more than 18 years. Our primary technology partners are Microsoft and SAP, and our implementation partners include small specialty SIs with specific areas of expertise, as well as larger global SIs and consultants like PwC and Lockheed Martin. Now, just to dive a little deeper into the problem that Gimmal software solves. The reason Gimmal exists is because we recognize that so many enterprises struggle to manage the sheer volume of information and systems they have. For years, they've been adding business applications and information, but haven't been able to create a consistent way to manage the lifecycle of their information across these systems or dispose of unneeded or outdated information. We understand this makes doing business more difficult, less secure, and less compliant. Gimmal's family of software products work together to help you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive software products include records management, content governance for SharePoint, file analysis, and the solution we'll be talking about today, which is document management for SAP solutions. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Nathan so he can begin the presentation.
Great, thank you, Shayna, and thank you everyone for joining today. So we're going to be talking about migration specifically when migrating to SharePoint and Microsoft 365 with your SAP document content. Before I get into the detail on the migration strategies, I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of the software itself with regards to storing document content related to SAP business transactions in your SharePoint and SharePoint Online Microsoft 365 environment. So this is standard functionality for SAP to be able to store document content so that it's accessible through the SAP user interface. And the benefits that this gives the user is that the documents are available where they intuitively expect to find them within the SAP interface. This gives the documents context, and by context, I mean the document has meaning because it is linked to a business transaction, as well as gives the document security in that it is available to the same user that has access to the business transaction within SAP. It also gives the user efficiency in the sense that it maintains the user's flow. They don't have to break out of what they are doing to go to a different application and find the document related to the transaction. However, although this is standard front-end functionality within SAP, these documents still get stored somewhere. And if that's not planned during implementation, then it could potentially have some outsized or unexpected costs associated with it. So the document storage that contains these documents that are accessible from SAP should be managed in a document lifecycle from creation to disposition. They should be available to other business processes outside of SAP. So those could be moved to intranet portals and collaboration sites, as well as be cost efficient to store. And so I'll have a bit more to say about that in a moment. These are all costs, but they're actually key benefits for storing these documents in SharePoint. So when storing documents in other places, the three most common sort of default options are the SAP database, which is where that document content will go if there's not any other further configuration. This, however, can vastly increase the size of the SAP database, which is problematic, especially as organizations look to move towards SAP HANA. With SAP HANA, the SAP database is actually stored in memory, which is great for real-time analytics and aggregation of business information and structured content. But it doesn't add any value to stored document content. And in fact, because of the additional size of the database, the necessary memory to hold that database becomes a cost issue. Another typical place for storing these documents related to SAP transactions is actually an SAP content server, which is a free reference implementation of the content server protocols that enable this functionality behind the scenes. It is available to SAP customers. The issues with using it are, although it's inexpensive to implement and license, it still requires IT infrastructure to run, and the IT infrastructure is fully focused on just providing that content to the SAP front end. It doesn't function as a true ECM solution for enterprise-wide access. So there are also third-party solutions within proprietary ECM models. And sometimes these are even sold as part of the SAP implementation. They're resold. And they are expensive in terms of both the licenses for the ECM systems, as well as the total cost of ownership for owning and maintaining these proprietary systems that require specialized skill sets. So just to sort of rehash that, the migration to SAP HANA is a key issue for storing things in the SAP database. The ability to access that data or that content across the enterprise as needed for other business processes or simply for non-SAP users, and then the expensive licenses, upgrades, and skill set for proprietary ECM solutions are the cost of using those platforms to store documents, which leads into the benefits of using Microsoft 365 for these documents. So whether it is preparing the SAP database for HANA migration or getting out from under the heel of an expensive proprietary ECM, there's a clear cost benefit for storing this document content in Microsoft 365. Because of the additional functionality in SharePoint related to Power Automate and Teams, there are benefits for being able to automate document-based processes outside of SAP, such as approval workflows, as well as being able to access that shared content effectively across the enterprise. Finally, there are tools for managing risk within SharePoint of maintaining that document content, such as access control, personal identifiable information, as well as third-party solutions like Gimmal for being able to retain and dispose of those documents in an appropriate lifecycle. So that sort of covers the benefits of using this kind of solution, and specifically why using SharePoint as the document repository for this kind of solution gives you both the benefits for the front end access from SAP, as well as enterprise-wide access and document management in a fully fledged ECM system like Microsoft SharePoint. So I'm going to get into one of the key things that we see when we are brought into organizations to affect these kinds of changes and help store those documents in SharePoint. And the key hurdle that is often perceived is the ability to migrate the existing document content from whatever the legacy solution was into SharePoint. So just to cover the basic options for migrating that content. The first is there are standard SAP migration tools that can be used for this migration. They're provided by SAP, and they take advantage of the concept of the content repository. A content repository is a configuration within your SAP system for directing that document content to different repositories, whether that is a content server or via document management for SAP solutions to a Microsoft 365 SharePoint site. They're very straightforward tools both to use and utilize. But there are additional, excuse me, additional third-party enhancements are available for that wrap around that functionality in order to provide more detailed auditing and messaging around these kinds of migrations. But very often the standard tools are more than sufficient for moving document content between arbitrary content repositories that are connected to SAP. For very large sets of document content, we have also in the past used the idea of import and export of that document content. So this is primarily for legacy ECM systems, and it's for transferring large amounts of content and making it available for external audit, as well as using traditional SharePoint migration tools for bringing that information into SharePoint. So I'm going to do some diagramming here of what an existing system likely looks at prior to migration. So on your top left, you'll see the SAP application server. If nothing has been specifically implemented for retaining this document content, then that archive and retrieval process is going directly to the SAP database. And that oftentimes causes the database to increase in size significantly, such that you have a database size concern when moving to SAP HANA. The other likely scenario is if you have a content server implementation or a proprietary ECM implementation, then that is configured as a content repository in your SAP system, and the archive and retrieval flows go in this direction. And then behind the scenes, that system is likely talking to its own database, where it's storing the content as well as retrieving it when requested. So that's pretty straightforward, but that should give you a general idea of where that document is stored and retrieved from in the pre-migration state. When using the SAP Provided Migration tools, the workflows, or the flow of document data rather, go in the following directions. So document that's stored in the SAP database can be directly retrieved from it. And similarly, the document content that's in a proprietary system can just be retrieved by the same tools that would normally serve it to the end user, doing the same backend communication with the database. In these examples, in this example, using the SAP provided tools, the SAP system then simply uses the alternate content repository for DM for SAP solutions to then re-archive the same documents linked to the same transactions. And then document management for SAP solutions uploads the document as expected to Microsoft 365 SharePoint Online. There can be then an optional process to retrieve the metadata via RFC call using the standard SAP.NET connector to retrieve that metadata, which is then passed on by document SAP solutions into SharePoint Online as SharePoint properties on the document. And so you really end up with a seamless transition of document and transaction data retrieved from either the database or the proprietary ECM system and uploaded into SharePoint with the metadata retrieved from the SAP transaction for everything that existed. And you were then in a go-forward state. And again, that's using completely standard SAP provided migration tools. There is also the option of adding additional functionality via third-party tools that really just wrap around the existing functionality within SAP in order to provide some additional control and monitoring of that migration. Although in general, they're not necessary for the average migration project. The more complex scenario is if you are interested in the export-import. While there still is this connection between the SAP database for any content that has been stored there and the regular archive and retrieval flows are set up with document management for SAP. With the proprietary ECM system, the capacity generally exists to export that content to some intermediary file server because it's just document content. And so it provides the same communication back to its own backend. And then there are industry standard tools for then importing that document content directly into SharePoint Online. From there are a few options. With document management for SAP solutions, there is functionality for linking content that has been uploaded into SharePoint to SAP transactions so that the archive flow actually goes in this direction. It is also possible if you have the archive link identifier to apply it directly to SharePoint. And if it's in the correct libraries as configured for document management for SAP solutions, then that retrieval can just happen directly. In addition, once the document is linked in such a way that document management for SAP solutions can retrieve it, then you can also configure additional metadata flows in order to fill that metadata in on the now SharePoint stored document. So although it's slightly more complex, this is a scenario that can be considered for various reasons. One is that you need to shut down your ECM system ahead of the migration, or if there's a concern around downtime and you need a direct switchover. And there are various reasons why you might want to do it in this way. But of course, we support both methods in terms of how we migrate that content into SharePoint and then get it retrievable again from the SAP system. So there is a straightforward migration of document content. whether you use the standard SAP tools, third-party wrappers around those tools, or the full export and import of that document content. This allows you to realize the benefits and return on investment for switching over to SharePoint quickly. So whether that's part of your preparation for a ultimate migration to HANA, we also see lift and shift operations of SAP systems with SharePoint backends into the Microsoft Azure cloud. Allows you to make that same document content that might otherwise be locked down with limited ECM licenses or even trapped in the SAP database, allows you to open that to your enterprise SharePoint users, whether it's for a collaborative access or to create additional business processes, for example, approval workflows that might exist outside, and even engage non-SAP users. And then very often it allows you to reduce your IT spend with getting off of the more locked down ECM systems into SharePoint, which increasingly has available. The Microsoft 365 is obviously a very cost-effective solution for storing the documents, and then there are a lot of SharePoint resources, both in the labor market and just available for reducing your total cost of ownership with storing documents in SharePoint. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the benefits of specific to Microsoft 365 in terms of storing your document content there. So whatever SAP systems that you're pulling from, whether it's traditional ECC or S/4HANA, Gimmal, our solution really allows you to take that document content and store it in, it says Office 365. It's obviously recently been renamed Microsoft 365, for then access via all the Microsoft tools. And allows you to optimize that document management as well as process management, and leverage your IT investments, whether they're involved in SAP or Microsoft side of the business. So obviously SharePoint is a very capable platform and increasingly becoming the ubiquitous ECM and collaboration platform. The pricing structure is extremely cost effective. It's available for your organization from the cloud, as well as accessible via mobile, and it's extremely extensible, as if you are using SharePoint today, I'm sure you're aware. So this is another example of how Gimmal document management for SAP solutions can connect your SAP systems to SharePoint. And one of the advantages with using Microsoft SharePoint in this way is the additional value you get from the hyperscaling that Microsoft is enacting with their global infrastructure. So whether that's optimizing performance by locating your ECM SAP systems in similar resource groups in Microsoft Azure, or it's controlling data sovereignty for data privacy requirements throughout the world, as those are becoming increasingly prevalent. And then, of course, you've got your top industry standard security, scalability, and redundancy that that Microsoft provides. So, grab my. So one of the key features of moving to Microsoft-based content services is the customers that use it today tend to be very satisfied with the availability and high quality, not only of the Microsoft products, but of the professional services and add-on solutions in the greater SharePoint ecosystem that then augment SharePoint with additional document lifecycle management and business processes. Microsoft has a clear cloud-first vision and has invested deeply both in hyperscaling their Azure network and updating the scalability and architecture of SharePoint as they've moved into the cloud. And that's also where Gimmal comes in with a lot of our solutions match with SAP and Microsoft, who are both key partners, technology partners, as well as implementation partners that we get involved in their projects, and are a tremendous resource for ours as well. We also have built out solutions for other ECM platforms, including Box, Google Suite, as well as even managing physical and file share related documents and document content. So in addition to document management for SAP solutions, we have a content governance platform for SharePoint, a federated records management product that can manage records in various places from a single interface, including Box, file share, obviously SharePoint, and physical. And then we have some content discovery and file analysis tools in the form of Gimmal Altitude. So if any of those seem relevant to your current business problems, then definitely be in touch with us, and we can show you how each of those solutions addresses problems that we see regularly in the market. The other thing I want to touch on is with combining SAP with Microsoft technologies ensures that you'll be on the leading edge of innovation and business software going forward. Obviously, SAP has its move towards real-time analytics with the in-memory HANA database. Microsoft, on the document side of things, is building out Project Cortex. And so by bringing the document context out of your SAP business transactions and storing it in SharePoint, you're future-proofing your organization to enable it to take advantage of the new intelligent capabilities that Microsoft is building into their platform, whether that's building out knowledge networks or using real data to teach the knowledge networks with your business specific data, using machine learning to train classifiers, and just generally taking advantage of those advancements that are happening in the industry in ECM, as well as the ERP analytics that come along with SAP. So that's all the detail on well, that's the overview of migrating content, as well as why you'd want to do it. I just have a few more slides to go through about Gimmal products and services. And as you've already heard today, we are Microsoft and SAP partners. Our document management for SAP solution product is certified via SAP. We actually just recertified it this year, and so we deeply embedded with both of those ecosystems. We are more and more building out technologies for the cloud that help bolster the cloud solutions from those industry leaders, and we have industry-leading technology for document lifecycle automation and record management. We've deployed software in over 14 different countries, customers in every major industry, and hundreds of thousands of licensed end users. We do have a professional services staff who are subject matter experts for document lifecycle management, records management, as well as experts in implementing our software in cost-effective implementation projects. And migration projects when you have document content stored in other places related to SAP transactions that you need moved to SharePoint. We also have a fantastic support staff that comes along with our software, also trained to be experts in all of our products.
Awesome. So
go ahead.
Bounce it back over to me. I just want to remind everyone that please submit any questions you have. We'll go ahead and start on the ones that are already submitted. But now we're going to go into the Q&A portion of the webinar. So Nathan, the first question we have here for you is, can Gimmal provide migration consulting as part of implementation services?
Sure, and I probably just answered that with the last slide, but yeah, it's actually a standard part of most of our document management for SAP solutions implementations, because we're very rarely the first document content implemented with SAP. A lot of times during the initial implementation, that there are so many pieces of SAP ERP to implement that the document aspect of it is just goes to the default SAP database. And especially now we're seeing organizational concern for getting that content out of the database ahead of SAP HANA migrations. SAP has pushed back the drop dead date, the deadline for moving to SAP HANA, but it's still on the horizon and a major implementation for many organizations. So getting that data out of the database and into a cost-effective solution like SharePoint is something that we're seeing a lot of, and we do those implementations with our professional services group. Yep.
Awesome. The next one is, can we add metadata in SharePoint even if we're not storing it in our legacy content server?
Yes. So the way that works is the systems that we have in place in Document Manager for SAP are able to use the standard SAP document ID to determine the transaction linkages that have been made in SAP with that document. And so based on that, you can configure Document Management for SAP to reach back out to the SAP system and use the document ID to retrieve other transactions, and then you specify what additional metadata you want directly out of SAP to store then in SharePoint properties. So it doesn't have to be something that was configured in your legacy system. It could be something that you enhance the document with that context, during the implementation of our solution.
Great, and I just saw one come up in the chat box window. Do you have an owner product or just do migration projects?
Do we have an owner product? So we do have our own product for. So what our maybe I didn't explain that well enough. What our solution does is we don't store the document in our solution. It is used to store the document in SharePoint. It is used on a go-forward basis for archive and retrieval. And so when new documents are added with SAP, they go through our solution to be stored in SharePoint. When they are retrieved from the SAP front end, they also are retrieved through our solution from SharePoint. That connection to SAP is not native functionality within SharePoint. However, once that document is available in SharePoint, then it's available to other processes. And that's why indexing it with additional metadata from the SAP business transaction makes it more available to search, makes it more available for document management. So. hopefully that cleared that up.
Great. We have another Q&A question. We have millions of documents that we would like to move to SharePoint. Is that reasonable or even possible using the migration methods you described?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done migrations in the tens of millions in terms of scale, and you know, we'd be raring to go if there was a 100 million one. And it's certainly something that we would work with you on. But certainly, more commonly, we see it in the sort of 1 to 10 million range, and absolutely, it's reasonable and very possible.
Great. And another one came up in the chat, and I can actually go ahead and answer this one. Is the slideshow recording available to us? A member of their team was unable to attend. The answer to that is yes. We will provide a recording of this webinar in the form of an email, thank you email, following up within 24 to 48 hours. So you will have access to these slides in this presentation. But that is it for the questions I see, unless any of them sneak in. We're going to go ahead and conclude today's session. Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, everyone, for joining. If you can think of any more questions, or if you'd like to receive a personal demonstration of our software, please feel free to email Nathan or myself directly. Our email addresses are right there up on the screen. Or Nathan, if you want to go to the next slide, you can email info@gimmal.com for general questions. And then again, for those interested in the recording, we're going to send it to everyone within 24 to 48 hours. But thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.
Great. Thank you, Shana. Cheers.